All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to tear down tariffs. You hear this term thrown around all the time, right? Global economic strategy. But what does it actually mean for you, for your bank account? Well, that's the real story, and it's all about what's left in your wallet at the end of the month.
Okay, so let me ask you something. What if, out of the blue, your yearly costs jumped by thousands of dollars? But here's the kicker. You didn't get a raise. Your paycheck is exactly the same. Sounds rough, right? Well, this isn't just some thought experiment. For millions of Americans, this is the new reality.
And that new reality, it's got a price tag, $2,100. Yeah. According to the latest analysis, that's the average extra cost an American family is shelling out every single year. And it's a direct hit from this policy of, quote, reciprocal tariffs. So here's our game plan. First, we'll get into what these tariffs actually are. Then we're going to look at who's feeling the pain, the white-collar squeeze, the service sector struggle, and the kind of tricky situation for farmers. And we'll wrap it all up with the final tally for the whole economy.
All right, let's dive in. To really get that big price tag we just talked about, we got to understand the policy behind it. So, what in the world are reciprocal tariffs?
You know, at its core, it's pretty simple. They're basically just taxes the US government puts on stuff we buy from other countries. The idea, or the stated goal anyway, is to use these taxes as leverage. It's like saying, hey, we'll tax your goods until you stop taxing ours so much. The hope is to create a more reciprocal or, a more fair playing field.
And make no mistake, the scale of this thing is huge. We're not just talking about one or two countries here. There's this global minimum tariff of 10% on goods from, well, pretty much everywhere. But then, for our biggest trading partners, that number just shoots up. Look at this, a minimum of 15% for the EU, 25% for India, China's getting hit with around 23% on key stuff, and even our neighbors in Canada are facing a 35% tariff. It's a lot.
So you might be thinking, okay, but folks with high-paying office jobs in big cities like LA or New York, they can probably just soak up these extra costs, right? Well, the reality is, it's a bit more complicated than that. Let's dig into what we're calling the white-collar squeeze. This right here, this quote from a project manager in LA, it really hits home. They're saying, look, we're still comfortable, but our future feels shakier. That bonus they were banking on for a down payment on a house? Poof, gone. Just like that, erased by a policy shift. That's a huge blow to a family's sense of moving forward. And the numbers really back this up. Check out this budget simulation for a professional in New York. The income stays the same at 10 grand a month, but look at the expenses. They jump by more than $350. And where does that money come from? Straight out of savings. But here's the part that really stings. Look at the emergency fund. That cushion, that safety net, it just got thinner. That's a real, tangible loss of security.
Okay, so that's one picture. But for the millions of people working in the service sector, in restaurants, in retail, this isn't about a delayed dream or a smaller savings account. No. For them, the struggle is right here, right now. And it is incredibly sharp.
Just listen to the difference here. This quote from a server in LA. It's not about an uncertain future. It's about an impossible present. My hours got cut. Groceries cost more. I don't know how we'll make it. When your paycheck shrinks and your food bill grows at the same time, that's a daily battle. That's survival mode.
And this just kicks off a devastating chain reaction, right? When people have less money, they go out less. So paychecks for service workers shrink because their hours and tips get cut. At the exact same time, the cost of essentials, we're talking food, gas, goes up by 3 to 5%. Their budgets are just broken. Job security, gone. And suddenly, families are forced to cut back on absolute essentials, not just luxuries. This leads to more people needing help from food banks and state aid. It's a spiral.
And this chart, wow, this really shows you the fundamental unfairness of it all. Economists have a word for this, regressive. It just means the burden isn't shared equally. As you can see, the lowest income families lose about 3.5% of their total income to these higher prices. For middle-income folks, it's about 2.7%. And for the highest earners, just 1%. So the financial weight falls hardest on the very people who can least afford to carry it.
All right, let's shift gears and head to America's heartland, because out here, the story gets even more complex. For the American farmer, this whole policy isn't just a simple cost or benefit. It's a classic double-edged sword.
Okay, so here's the central conflict. On one side of the sword, you have protection. Tariffs on foreign crops make imported food more expensive, which can help American farmers compete here at home. That's the pro. But the other side of that sword is retaliation. When we tax their goods, other countries turn around and tax ours. And that can price American farmers right out of their biggest international markets, sometimes literally overnight.
And you can see this playing out differently depending on the crop. Look at soybeans and almonds. They're getting hammered because China and India, huge markets for them, have slapped on retaliatory tariffs. But then you've got citrus growers who might actually see prices go up because imports from places like Brazil and Mexico are now more expensive. And then there are crops like corn and cotton, just caught in the crossfire, with prices swinging all over the place. It's creating this crazy quilt of winners and losers across the country.
And all this chaos leads to something you might not expect. This simulation here is pretty wild. It shows that some of the huge export-focused farms could actually see their profits increase by as much as 17%. But the small and medium-sized local farms, they're the ones getting squeezed. Their profits are actually falling because they're hit with all the new costs but don't have the scale to play these new market games.
But here's the one thing that hits every single farmer no matter what they grow or how big their operation is. It's the catch. Their costs are going up. Period. The price for essentials like fertilizer, fuel, and machine parts, a lot of which are imported, is up anywhere from 7 to 15%. So even for the supposed winners, a big chunk of that extra revenue is getting eaten up by higher expenses right away.
Okay, so we've seen the personal stories. We've looked at the impact on office workers, on servers, on farmers. So now let's zoom all the way out. Let's look at the final tally. What's the bottom line for the entire U.S. economy?
And the headline number here is pretty sobering. The analysis projects that these trade policies are going to result in 578,000 fewer jobs in the U.S. by the end of 2025. And that's a combination of jobs that were lost and jobs that were just never created in the first place because of the economic drag.
And this chart really gives you the national balance sheet in one quick look. On the downside, overall economic growth, the GDP, is projected to take a hit, down about 0.8%. And consumer prices are up nearly 2%. That's the inflation you feel every time you go to the store. But there is one number on the other side of the ledger. Domestic manufacturing is projected to grow by 2%, because American-made stuff becomes more competitive against those more expensive imports. Which brings us to the fundamental question at the heart of all this: protectionism versus purchasing power. Where do you strike the balance? Is the goal to protect certain industries at home, even if it makes everyday life more expensive for pretty much everyone else? Or is the goal to maximize the financial power, the purchasing power of every single person? There's no easy answer here. But finding that balance, that's the economic tightrope that we're all walking on right now.